Front of the leg. The leg is a part of the lower limb that lies between the knee and the ankle. Now, the superficial fascia of the leg consists of superficial veins. In the superficial veins, we have dorsal venous arch. It lies on the dorsum of the foot over the proximal part of the metatarsals. Now, dorsal digital veins. There are two dorsal digital veins in each toe. Each joins the corresponding vein of the adjacent toe to form the dorsal metatarsal vein, which terminates in the dorsal venous arch. The dorsal digital vein on the medial side of the big toe joins the medial end of the dorsal venous arch to form the great saphenous vein, and the dorsal digital vein on the lateral side of the little toe joins the lateral end of the dorsal venous arch to form the short saphenous vein. Now, great saphenous vein, it passes upwards in front of the medial malleolus, crosses lower 1/3 of the medial surface of the tibia to reach the medial border of the tibia, while it ascends to reach the back of the knee. The saphenous nerve runs in front of the great saphenous vein. Now, the small saphenous vein passes upwards behind the lateral malleolus to reach back of the leg, where the sural nerve accompanies it. Now, the cutaneous nerves on the front of the leg and dorsum of the foot are infrapatellar branch of the saphenous nerve. We have a saphenous nerve. We have lateral cutaneous nerve of the calf, superficial peroneal nerve. Now, this superficial peroneal nerve, it arises from the common peroneal nerve on the lateral side of the neck of the fibula. It pierces the deep fascia at the junction of upper 2/3 and lower 1/3 of the lateral side of the leg and divides into medial and lateral branches. The superficial peroneal nerve supplies skin over the lower 1/3 of the lateral side of the leg, whole of the skin of the dorsum of the foot except the cleft between the first and second toes, which is supplied by the deep peroneal nerve. It supplies the lateral border of the foot, which is except the lateral border of the foot, which is supplied by sural nerve, and except the medial border of the foot up to the ball of the big toe, which is supplied by the saphenous nerve. Now, deep fascia of the leg is very strong and encloses the leg like a tight sleeve. It does not cover the subcutaneous bony surfaces and is attached to their borders. It is fused with the periosteum where the bones are subcutaneous. The two intermuscular septa, anterior and posterior, extend inwards from the facial sleeve and get attached to the anterior and posterior borders of the fibula. This is the anterior intermuscular septum. This is the posterior intermuscular septum. These, together with interosseous membrane, divide the leg into three facial compartments, each having its own muscles arteries and nerves. These compartments are anterior compartment, lateral compartment and posterior compartment. In the posterior compartment, the muscles are divided into three layers by the superficial transverse septum and deep transverse septum. Now the retinacula. Around the ankle, deep fascia is thickened to form strong fibrous bands called retinacula. Because they retain the tendons around the ankle in place and prevent their bowstring during the movements of the foot. The retinacula are superior and inferior. Superior and inferior extensor retinacula. Superior extensor retinacula, it is a broad band of deep fascia just above the ankle joint. Vertically, it is about 1.5 inches wide. Medially, it is attached to the lower part of the anterior border of the tibia, and laterally it is attached to the lower part of anterior border of fibula. Medially, it splits. Medially, this is the superior extensor reticula. Medially, it splits to enclose the tendon of tibialis anterior along with the synovial sheath. The other structures of the anterior compartment, that is the extensor hallucis longus, deep peroneal nerve, anterior tibial artery, extensor digitorum longus, peroneus tertius, pass deep to the superior extensor retinaculum. Tendons of these muscles are not surrounded by the synovial sheaths, and deep peroneal nerve and anterior tibial artery lie deep to the tendon of extensor hallucis longus. Now, inferior extensor retinaculum, it is Y-shaped band of deep fascia situated in front of the ankle joint and proximal parts of the tarsum of the foot. The septum of the Y-shaped Y lies laterally, and the upper and lower bands lie medially. The septum is attached. It is attached to the anterior non-articular part of the superior surface of calcaneum in front of the sulcus calcaneus. The upper band of the Y passes upwards and medially to be attached to the anterior border of medial malleolus. The lower band of Y passes downwards and medially over the foot to fuse with the deep fascia of the sole. Now the relations. The septum of the Y forms loop around the tendons of extensor digitorum longus and the peroneus tertius with their common synovial sheaths. The upper band of the Y splits to enclose the tendon of tibialis anterior, extensor hallucis longus with their synovial sheaths. The anterior tibial artery and deep peroneal nerve pass deep to it. The lower band of the Y passes superficially to the tendons of the tibialis anterior and extensor hallucis longus with their separate synovial sheaths, and also superficially to the dorsalis pedis artery and deep peroneal nerve. Now, function of this extensor retinaculum, these keep the structures of the anterior compartment of the leg at ankle in position, prevents the tendons from springing medially when the foot is inverted. Now the anterior compartment or extensor compartment of the leg, its boundaries are: anteriorly is the deep fascia of the leg, Medially is the lateral surface of shaft of tibia, and laterally is the anterior intermuscular septum, and posteriorly is the interosseous membrane. Now the contents of the anterior compartment are muscles. There are 4 muscles: tibialis anterior, extensor hallucis longus, extensor digitorum longus, and peroneus tertius. Now arteries are the anterior tibial artery, and the nerve is the deep peroneal nerve, that is also known as anterior tibial nerve. All the muscles of the anterior compartment of the leg arise from the fibula, except the tibialis anterior, which arises from the tibia. Now this tibialis anterior, it is a spindle shaped muscle, multipinnate. It is most medial and superficial dorsiflexor of the foot. It arises from the upper 2/3 of the lateral surface of the tibia, and adjoining part of the lateral condyle of the tibia, adjoining part of the interosseous membrane, and overlying the fascia of the leg. The muscle fibers converge below to form a tendon, which is related to the lower 1/3 of the lateral surface of the tibia. It pierces the medial part of superior extensor retinaculum and the upper band of the inferior extensor retinaculum. It passes medially underneath the inferior head of inferior extensor retinaculum to be inserted on the inferomedial side of the base of the first metatarsal bone and adjacent part of the medial cuneiform. It is supplied by the deep peroneal nerve. It is the chief dorsiflexor of the foot at the ankle joint. It maintains the medial longitudinal arch, and it acts as an inverter of the foot at the mid-tarsal and subtalar joints. Now anterior tibial artery. Anterior tibial artery is the main artery of the anterior compartment of the leg. It corresponds to the posterior interosseous artery of the forearm. The blood supply of the anterior compartment of the leg is reinforced by the perforating branch of peroneal artery. Therefore, the size of the peroneal artery is inversely proportional to that of the anterior tibial artery. The anterior tibial artery is the smaller terminal branch of the popliteal artery given at the lower border of the popliteus muscle. It begins in the back of the leg at the lower border of popliteus. It enters the anterior compartment of the leg by passing forwards between the 2 heads of tibialis posterior through an opening in the upper part of the interosseous membrane. In the anterior compartment, it runs vertically downwards to a point midway between the medial and lateral malleoli, where it enters the foot and changes its name to dorsalis pedis artery, which ends near the web between the big and the second toe. In the upper 1/3 of the leg, the anterior tibial artery lies between the tibialis anterior and extensor digitorum longus. In the middle 1/3 of the leg, it lies between the tibialis anterior and extensor hallucis longus, and in the lower 1/3 it lies between the extensor hallucis longus and the extensor digitorum longus. It is crossed from the lateral to the medial side by the tendon of the extensor hallucis longus. Now it is branches. It gives anterior and posterior tibial recurrent arteries. They take part in the arterial anastomosis around the knee joint. Muscular branches to the adjacent muscles and anterior, medial, and anterior lateral malleolar arteries. They take part anastomosis around the ankle joint. Now deep peroneal nerve. Deep peroneal nerve, it's a nerve of the anterior compartment of the leg and dorsum of the foot. It corresponds to the posterior interosseous nerve of the forearm. It is one of the two terminal branches of the common peroneal nerve at the neck of the fibula. It begins on the lateral side of the neck of fibula under cover of the upper fibers of the peroneus longus muscle. It enters the anterior compartment of the leg by piercing the anterior intermuscular septum. It pierces the extensor digitorum longus and descends in this compartment with the anterior tibial artery. In the leg, it accompanies the anterior tibial artery. The nerve lies lateral to the artery in its upper one-third and lower one-third. And anterior to the artery in the middle one-third. It is said in the middle one-third the nerve hesitates to cross the artery from lateral to medial side, so it is also known as nervus hesitans. The nerve ends in front of the ankle by dividing into lateral and medial terminal branches. The lateral terminal branch runs laterally and ends in a pseudoganglion deep to the extensor digitorum brevis. Branches from the pseudoganglion supply the extensor digitorum brevis and tarsal and metatarsal joints on the lateral side of the foot. The medial terminal branch runs forwards and ends by supplying the skin of the adjacent sides of the big and second toe. That is the first interdigital cleft and first dorsal interosseous muscle. Now branches of this are muscular branches which supply all four muscles of the anterior compartment of the leg, that's the extensor digitorum brevis on the dorsum of the foot, and first dorsal interosseous muscle of the sole. Cutaneous bands supply the skin of the first interdigital cleft.